Yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Tuesday morning, the 12th of May, 2026. Today, we come live at exactly 10 minutes to the hour of 9 a.m. Yes, we have come here multiple times a bit late or even very late, and it still enlarged us. So I figured, how about we come a bit early? How would that feel? And today I decided to do that. So we are here for the early morning conversation about the latest from the world of football. And a lot is going on in as far as the discussion is concerned. I do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda, where today it is a public holiday. I mean, in a never seen before experience, because the president is being sworn in for his seventh elective term and ninth term since he came to power. So that's about it. That's about it. So it's a public holiday. It's typical Uganda. I mean, not that because we've never had a public holiday just because the president was swearing it. It's always been a routine event of get get it get it done with it. Put your hand on the Bible and say, "And so help me God," and then get on with it or move on. That kind of thing. So but it is what it is. The decision makers decided that it be a public holiday, and hence it is. But I hope I hope everything is okay with you guys. So before we get into the thick of this morning's conversation, allow me to send out my sincere special thanks to all of you that managed to catch last night's podcast. It went on for about 1 hour and 40 minutes. Thank you so much for your indulgence. For those of you that kept us company, people like Gladiator, people like Reluctant Gamer who chipped in, a man like Cats. There's another gentleman, Steve Bano, and all of you, and the rest of you out there that managed to catch the conversation. So it was a pleasure to have you around. I thank you for keeping us company. Thank you for believing in us and rendering us your time, because time is such a precious commodity. When any of you tunes out there picks up their phone, tunes into the Football Tribe UG, picks up their tablet or turns on their TV, their computer, it's not something I take for granted. I do appreciate it a great deal. So this morning, we are here to continue with the conversation in as far as football is concerned. As we speak, of course, forget not that we do have midweek games, particularly in the Spanish La Liga, but also we'll have two games in the French League One. That's tomorrow, as well as a game in the Premier League that will be between Manchester City and Crystal Palace. The games in the French League One tomorrow will be between Strasbourg and Lens, and then PSG up against away to Lens, or RC Lens. That's the other game. Today in the Spanish La Liga, you have games between Celta Vigo against Levante, Real Betis against Elche, as well as Osasuna at 10:30 p.m. At home against Atletico de Madrid. So that's what you ought to look forward to in as far as today is concerned. But before you look forward to today, forget not that yesterday Napoli were beaten up against by Bologna by 3 goals to 2. Then Girona and Rayo Vallecano shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw, just as much as Tottenham Hotspur did against Leeds United, as Leeds delayed their Premier League relegation survival. Now it was a game of great importance or of great significance, or at least meant to be, for Tottenham Hotspur. And maybe the result does not quash the idea that it was nonetheless a very important game for this Tottenham Hotspur side, who, by the way, fired the blanks in the opening half until the second half, when Matthias Tel capitalized on a not so distant cleared corner to bury the ball in the back of the net beyond the reach of Carlo Dallo. And then later on, in the 74th minute, Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored his 13th goal of the Premier League campaign when he converted from the penalty spot the resultant penalty, having judged against Matthias Tel himself for an overhead kick that ended up brushing off a Leeds player as head. Now, like I said last night, my thoughts about that have not changed that much, because I do feel for, I for one do feel for him, Matthias Tel in particular, because yes, it was a penalty. And according to Roberto De Zerbi, he thinks maybe VAR felt compelled to intervene because of what happened with Arsenal yesterday, the other day on Sunday, in their game against Leeds. And albeit he acknowledges that 200% it was a foul on the goalkeeper, that's David Raya, he thinks yesterday VAR worked to his disadvantage. He thinks that for some reason maybe they felt compelled to you know felt compelled to act in terms of intervening. Now, I understand why they intervened. First of all, it's a kick on the head. It's a kick on the head. You know? Now, when it's a kick on the head for a high ball, such a high ball, it's hard to ignore. Two, to be fair to Matthias Tel, at the moment of going in for the overhead kick, you're not sighting, you're not envisioning that a close-by player is coming to contest for this ball with the header. So once you go into that action to volley the ball away or bicycle kick it away, it's really, really hard for you to then restrain, for you to restrain yourself when the actual moment comes. I'll give you an example. If you swing your hand to slap a mosquito on your hand, and then at the very last millisecond, it flies away, it's really hard to stop your hand, midway the swing. Chances are you're going to hit yourself. I don't mean hitting yourself to death, but I mean, that's the most relatable comparison I can make. You have a bug on your skin and then you want to, smash it. As you take that action to smash it, then the bug flies away at the last second. It's really, really hard to suddenly put yourself to a stop and not hit yourself. So I felt for Matthias Tel, because as much as he's the one that scored the goal on the other side, that gave his side the desired goal, much desired goal, he fell culprit on the side in conceding that penalty. So I really, really felt for him. Overall, in the context of the game, I thought both teams had a good game. I did not think there's enough to separate the two sides, because very late on in the game, Leeds also hit the inside of the woodwork through Shane Longstaff. Tottenham Hotspur had 16 shots on goal compared to Leeds' 11. Leeds had 4 on target compared to Tottenham's 3. It was a game of sort of small margins. Yes, Tottenham were dominant in good chunks of the game, and they ended up dominating possession to the tune of 57% compared to 43% over Leeds United. It was a home fixture for Tottenham, but we're talking about a team whose home form has been so shambolic that they are 19th on the Premier League table in as far as home form is concerned, having secured only 12 points at home. And yet the reverse couldn't be miles apart, because their away form is brilliant, or has been good this season. They are 5th on the Premier League globe in terms of their away form, having amassed a total of 26 points. So, whereas it was a must-win for Tottenham Hotspur, the prevailing circumstances or context of their whole season across the campaign at home dictated otherwise. They dictated that anything could happen in this game. And indeed, it's that what happened. Then Leeds on the other side have been a really, really good side. They haven't always been exceptional. They've had their bad moments throughout the campaign, especially at the start of it. They really, really looked bad. They were conceding so many goals, things like that. Typical Daniel Faki ball. But then he tweaked a few things and they looked a bit better. I've thought that they've always competed well. There are games that they've lost, and on paper, ideally, or based on their performances on the pitch, they did not deserve to lose in a way. I remember that 3-2 defeat against Manchester City, I think, at the Etihad Stadium. It's one of those games that you look back on and say, and think to yourself that, and think to yourself, maybe Leeds should have earned a point out of that one, because they went 2-0 down and fought their way back into a 2-2 draw. Unfortunately, I think they got done by a late goal by Phil Foden, So they've been that kind of team. So yesterday, picking up a point, really my prediction had been a 2-1 victory for Tottenham Hotspur, as not left surprised by the result of a 1-0 draw. The one thing that I was a little bit surprised with was the amount of stoppage time that was added. 13 minutes. Whatever the justification of that was from the referee, felt a bit odd. I don't want to say suspicious, but felt a bit odd. I remember because I think it was at the World Cup when FIFA sought to reduce time wasting. In other words, due to time wasting, the ball spends very little time on the pitch being played than ideally you'd want to have it. I'll give you an example. The game has a span of 90 minutes ordinarily, but you'll find that the game averages anywhere between 60 maybe to 78 minutes, and all the other minutes are wasted off the pitch in terms of throw-ins, corner kicks, free kicks, and other delayed actions, other delayed actions. So they granted the referees leeway to add in whichever amount of time they saw fit, regardless of, whether there was a big moment or injury that puts play at a standstill for a couple of minutes. So that's why, for me, it felt a little bit odd. And you could see Tottenham really, really tried to push for it. They got so many corners in this game. They had a total of 14 corners compared to Leeds' only 2. All those corners were a result of Tottenham's persistent attacks, but also Leeds' composure defensively. They wanted to find the breakthrough. They wanted to win this game so badly, but they just did not do enough to try to win it or to win it. So, and there it is. So that means on the Premier League log, they remain at 38 points, only 2 above West Ham United, who lost to Arsenal over the weekend. What then that means is that their battle against relegation is far from over. They still have a game against Chelsea and Everton. That's for Tottenham Hotspur. The game against Chelsea is going to be away from home. I forget exactly what the venue will be for the game against Everton. Now, they need at least a win to guarantee their safety, to avoid relegation, which then would also depend on how things go with West Ham United. Because, West Ham on the other side equally have 2 games left to play. And those games are against Newcastle and Leeds United on the final day of the season. So with that 2-point difference, mathematically, it simply means that West Ham can finish above Tottenham Hotspur if they win their remaining 2 games and Tottenham only wins one and loses the other. So, because if Tottenham wins one, it will take them to 41 points, and they lose the other. If West Ham win all their remaining two games, it can take them to 42 points, meaning they would finish a point above Tottenham Hotspurs. So that's their task at hand. Of the two, who has the more difficult games? It's a bit of a hard question to digest. But I'll say, based on the standings of the Premier League table, you'd make a case to say West Ham have it easier. Why? They play against Leeds United, who are 14th, and Newcastle, who are 13th on the Premier League log. So that's their responsibility. In comparison, Tottenham Hotspurs have to play a 9th placed Chelsea and a 10th placed Everton side. Regardless of what you think of the other two or the respective teams in terms of opponents, the one thing that they have for them, those opponents, is that they're just playing to climax the season. They don't really have much to play for other than trying to finish a place higher than they currently occupy on the Premier League table. And I've always maintained that it's very, very difficult to come up against a team that do not have anything to lose. Once you're up against a team that do not have anything to lose in the context of a game or match to play for, they can be very stubborn, because then that puts you under pressure because you're desperate for the win. You're desperate for the 3 points. For them, they couldn't care any less about how it goes. They may care that they don't lose the game. But when you weigh the significance of the game, always there's that one team that needs it the more. So can West Ham United bring themselves to beating Newcastle and Leeds United? Newcastle are a beatable team, given the trends we've seen of them this season. They're a very, very beatable team. The question is, are West Ham ready to pounce? Leeds can be a beatable opponent. But on the final day of the season, it can also become as dramatic. Then also, on the other hand, the same applies for Tottenham Hotspurs. Going by recent form, where they've only picked a point out of their last 7 Premier League games, Chelsea is a very beatable team. And bearing in mind that it's away from home that they've done themselves the most of favors, if any, this season, what that would imply is that Tottenham are capable of going away to Stamford Bridge and getting a result. Then because if everything goes perfectly well for West Ham United, Tottenham would need to pray to win one and draw one. Essentially, it would put the two teams level on points. In putting the two teams level on points, Tottenham's goal difference is in better health, or is in less dire need than that of West Ham, because West Ham have a negative 20 and Tottenham have a negative 9. A part of me wishes it comes down to that goal difference. Maybe then West Ham will appreciate that conceding for goals for fun across a Premier League campaign is not an ideal thing. It's not a good thing, that you ought to defend better, that you ought to show more grit. Good morning, Raymond Kangumba. Raymond joins us, says, hi, Nottingham Forest versus Newcastle. It was an embarrassing draw, poor season. Both and Ed Howe should be sacked. Then you say Xabi Alonso should be appointed Newcastle manager. Unfortunately for you, Raymond, it looks like Chelsea are the real team pursuing Xabi Alonso at the moment, and Newcastle are nowhere near it in the frames of it. So that's just the honest bit of it, you know. That's just the honest bit of it. Anyways, so that's the responsibility that Tottenham Hotspurs have for themselves, you know. Playing Everton on the final day of the season can be a stubborn thing. I remember last season when Newcastle were pushing for a Champions League place and they hosted Everton at home in the final game of the season. Everton went to St. James's Park and beat them by, by a goal to nil. And that, in part, epitomizes of, regardless of what your aspirations or goals are, you ought to, excuse me, you're not going to get a free ride. You're not going to get any favors from your opponents. For example, they were speaking to Oliver Glasner and they were telling him about how he's going to be very, very pivotal in the Premier League title race. And he said he doesn't give a rat's ass about the Premier League title race. All he has to do is what's in the best interest of Crystal Palace. And that's what he will do. So what helped Newcastle was that Chelsea beat up Nottingham Forest by goal to nil, and Man United beat up against Aston Villa on the final day of the season by 2 goals to nil. So it meant that in spite of their loss to Everton, Newcastle still qualified for the UEFA Champions League as the 50th place team on the Premier League log, So basically, it came down to that. So for Tottenham to be playing Everton on the final day of the season will leave themselves with no encouragement to say, yeah, that's an easier game. No. Or that Everton are going to come as a lesser opponent. Unless for some of these teams, their respective national teams reach out and say, you don't have much to fight for. Do not risk some of these players that we hope we can take to the World Cup. Do not risk them. That's the only way it can happen. And even that is still not a given. So anyways, let's move away briefly from the Premier League. Briefly, like I said. Yesterday, Ousmane Dembele was voted the French League One player of the season. And I'm not a big consumer of the French League One. I'll begin with that disclaimer. But nonetheless, for the fair share of filtration of what I get out of the French League One, I'm still baffled by this. My thoughts about football awards and awards in general, but particularly those of football, have been prejudiced. Why? I've known awards to be for players that contribute both in their individual capacity, but also to the collective responsibility of a team and what it means for them. The winners usually want this accolade. But I also appreciate the fact that it's not always a player that is part of the winning team that must be the standout player in a campaign. I appreciate that. I respect that for what it is. But on this time round, I'll beg to be excused. One, it feels like the 2025 Ballon d'Or winner is still riding on Ballon d'Or luck. We are talking about a player who has made 20 appearances in the French League One. He's managed only 9 starts, the 11 being cameos off of the bench. He's played 960 minutes. Now, if you want to understand the significance of that, is that the French League One player with the most number of minutes or appearances this season is Jordan Lefort. Now, Jordan Lefort, who plays for Angers, has 2,000 and he has about 2,970 minutes. 2,970 minutes of minutes on the pitch. You compare that to Ousmane Dembele, and Ousmane Dembele, or in this particular case, Jordan Lefort, has played 2,010 minutes more than Dembele. Now, it's not just about playing many minutes. It's about what you do with the minutes that you've been afforded. But I want to bring myself to believe that there's players that have played more games, players that have had better and bigger contributions to their respective teams overall across board when it comes to the French League One. Of course, PSG are going to win it, or have already won it in principle for the 12th time in 14 years. That 1-0 victory against Brest left them within 6 points ahead of Lens, with whom RC Lens are only 6 points behind PSG. But even if PSG were to lose all their remaining games, including that game in hand against RC Lens, they would finish at the same number of points, which is about 73. Now, is it 73? I think so. Yeah. But because PSG have a significantly superior goal difference, they have a plus 44 goals compared to RC Lens' 29. It's hard to envision a world where RC Lens come and score as many goals to upset that goal difference. But then also, the one other thing you ought to appreciate is at least they've competed. That's for RC Lens. Then you look at players like Esteban Lipol from Stade Rennes, 20 goals. You look at a player like Joaquin Pancelli at Strasbourg, his 16 goals, I'm sure, have been of great significance to the Strasbourg side. Mason Greenwood, he's been one of the most consistent players in as far as the French League One has been concerned. Of course, they've not finished in an ideal position. The point I'm trying to make is that there must be players that have performed better than Ousmane Dembele. And whereas the statistical numbers of goals is just not enough to justify it all, why I wanted to lay those examples on table is to show you that there are players that, if it comes to numbers, have better numbers. Then also, because part of being a good player is also you ought to be available for your team's selection. Then the other thing is that he scored 10 goals and provided 6 assists in those 20 appearances. Now, mathematically, that's a brilliant return on investment if you have a 16-goal involvement in 20 games. Brilliant. But let's not forget that there's a game, I think, was it against Lille or Marseille? I think against Olympique Marseille, in the reverse fixture that they won by 5-0, when he scored 2 goals. So it's not like you've been scoring in half of every game you've appeared in. So that's there to the side. Also, the 28-year-old last season netted 21 times and provided 8 assists. That was a 29-goal involvement in, I think, about 29 league appearances or something. When you compare those numbers, 10 goals and 6 assists, when you look particularly in the goals column, you'll notice that there's a decline in his performance or in goal squad. How then are we rewarding a player that has only declined in his own performances and overall availability to the rest of the team? It's similar to what my frustration is with the Ballon d'Or. And this is the same player that is being mooted around for the accolade of the Ballon d'Or. And I'm object to it. You know, I'm in opposition to it. Why? Because I feel, and it's just not a feeling, it's a statement of fact, that these accolades have been tailored to players who score goals. I understand that a goal is the most important statistic of the game. But you see, if you're banging in the goals and they are also entering this side, then you're not doing much. You know? In other words, I want us to appreciate other players that do not score as much. I want us to have an appreciation for goalkeepers that stand out, for centre backs that stand out, whether left back or right back, midfielders, holding midfielders or central midfielders. Let's have an appreciation for them. To say, you may have not scored this number of goals like this guy, but your contribution to the success of your team has been quite immense in you fulfilling your duty and responsibilities. I'll give you an example. If you work in an organization where you have, let's say, a production manager and a sales manager, and they're both exceeding well at their overall work, how then do you say sales is better than production? Just because they've sold all the products. It's commendable that they've sold all the product, but essentially they've simply done their job. They've done that is expected of them to sell the product. But also on the other side, you appreciate that the production manager has worked hard to ensure product is readily available. So really, you ought to look at it in that perspective. A lot of times we never focus on defenders, we never focus on goalkeepers. Why? Because they do not have those kinds of numbers in terms of goals and assists. But in not having those numbers, it does not mean that they've not done their job. Many of them are still good executioners of their respective jobs. So until when you appreciate that in a team sport, players with goals and assists are always going to win these major accolades. I would have zero qualms if Dembele won it and it felt deserved. But given the number of minutes he's played, you see, sometimes statistics can be misleading. I'll give you an example. You have two strikers. They play 5 games. And they both score 5 goals. One scores a hat-trick in game 1. Another one scores 1 goal. Game 2, the other guy scores 2 goals. And he does not score in the next 3 games. But this guy scores 1 goal in each of every game. On paper, they are level. They both scored 5 goals. But if I just throw it to you as a statistic without the context of the arrangement of those goals or how those goals have come, then in a way, I'll be misleading if I'm calling you to pass judgment on those players. So I would appreciate a player that scores in every single game more than a player that will score a hat-trick in this game and not score in the next 3 games. I'd appreciate the other player more, you know? If we are in appreciation of the goal as a statistic. So there's that. And imagine if PSG were to go on and win the UEFA Champions League. His name will be propped further. By awarding him the French Ligue 1 Player of the Year, they put him back in that conversation for the world to start thinking, LO says hi, good to have you on the broadcast. Where are you joining us from, So they put him back in that conversation. But for me personally, I cannot wave off this feeling of I feel like he's still riding on the fortunes of his Ballon d'Or triumph last year. You say, how are you? I'm all right. How about yourself? And please let me know where you're joining us from. What team do you support? And if you don't mind, your gender. The reason why I ask for your gender is because I don't want to mess around and say him, her, and misplace those pronouns. I've burnt my fingers a couple of times because the names people come here with tend to be sort of gender neutral, and I tend to misfire. You say you're male. Okay. How are you, my brother? See? So imagine I said, how are you, my sister? So, anyways, thank you so much for your kindness to be able to reveal that. Michael Barros says, how are you? Hi, Michael. Good to have you on the broadcast. How are you doing? Kindly like the broadcast, please. But also, the two of you, please consider subscribing to the channel. So, for me, that's it with Ousmane Dembele. Of course, he becomes one of the 5 players to win the accolade for 2 consecutive times. He won it last year. Then players previously like Zlatan Ibrahimovic at PSG have also won it for 2 consecutive seasons. But more recently, or more known to that, is Kylian Mbappe. Won it 5 times in a row before his departure at the end of the 2023-2024 season, when he left to go and join Real Madrid. So, okay, Michael says, I'm great, thanks. Okay, that's good to know. He's asking you, Michael, how are you, Michael? Okay, you have good English. Thank you so much for the compliments there. So basically, for me, when it comes to Raymond says, hi, Raymond, we talked about this. We have discussed the Newcastle case. We've moved on past it. Please bring yourself to discuss other topics. Please, please. Do not digress back into the old you, Raymond. I work in men's fashion. Oh, you work in men's fashion. That's Michael Barros. I'm not very good when it comes to fashion knowledge, really. You say mainly men's shoes and socks. I do. Okay. I do love shoes. I do appreciate a good shoe. If anything, I do really, really appreciate a good shoe. And we all know 9 times out of 10, when you meet people out there, before you have an interaction with them, they are going to judge you based on what you're wearing. So never forget that. Grevo is back with us. Grevo says, I am ETG. Remember? Yes, I remember. Grevo, ETG. Good to have you back on the broadcast. What kind of socks are you wearing? Oh, I love ankle socks. Ankle socks are my thing. I find them very simple. I find them very simple on the go, Rio Dandy says Lewa got 14 league titles. He's 14 league titles now. He's had a tremendous career. Robert Lewandowski. He's had a tremendous career. Bro, I'm that guy. Grovo. Yeah, okay. You say Barcelona won the league in the Bernabeu? No, no, no. This season, it was at the Camp Nou. Real Madrid were playing away to the Camp Nou. That's where the Barcelona sealed their league title. You say, are you wearing ankle socks now? Yeah. Unfortunately, I cannot show you because we can only show this part. I do not want to begin twisting my camera and trying to raise my leg up just to show you. But, I love ankle stockings. Anyways, so for me, that's it with Ousmane Dembele. I feel that he is still riding on last season's luck, where he obviously deservedly won the Ballon d'Or, but I feel that's what is propelling him forward to be named as a as French League One Player of the Year. Then two, let me answer those questions in a bit. And Gravel. Let me answer those ones in a bit. The other accolades went to Desli Doué, the 20-year-old French international, bagged the accolade for Young Player of the Season. He scored about 7 goals and provided 2 assists in the French League One this season. Then the other person awarded was the Arsenal's head coach, Pierre Sage. He was awarded head coach of the season or manager of the season in those awards, and I feel like sounds more deserved. Yes, he's not won the French League One title, but at least he's competed favorably well against a team that has bigger and better resources in comparison against his team. So you ought to give him his flowers to that effect. So, and the two are playing on Wednesday in that game in hand that they have against each other for what would be match day 33 for them. So there's that really, and it's something that we are waiting to see on Wednesday night. I hope I do not forget. I need to watch that game. I really, really need to watch that game. Really. So, anyways, those were the French League One awards yesterday. Michael Olise from FC Bayern Munich was voted the best French player of the year, best abroad. I think it's very, very deserved accolade. I don't know which other players competed with him, but I would want to think players like William Saliba were close in contention there. But I think Michael Olise really, really does deserve it. He's had such a tremendous season with Bayern Munich. Last I checked, I think he had the 31 goal involvement in as far as the German Bundesliga was concerned, and you do not get those numbers very often. And remember, this is only his second campaign with Bayern Munich, and when you look at his numbers, I mean, they've been tremendous to see. 15 goals scored and 20 assists. That's a 35 goal involvement in 31 games. That's only in the league alone. And even in the Champions League, he did really, really well. So well-deserved Michael Olise for the award. Anyways, let me retreat back to some of your comments as we get the conversation going on this beautiful Tuesday morning, the 12th of May. Okay. Okay. ETG said, okay, Joao Pedro bicycle kick was good. Yeah, that was a brilliant goal that he scored against Nottingham Forest. Then, say, who is your favorite footballer? My favorite football player of all time is Ronaldinho Gaucho, the assist Moreira. Rio Dandy said, I find Fernando Torres better than Wayne Rooney. Wow, that's a hot take. That's a hot take. As a 9, as a finisher, I think Fernando Torres at Atletico de Madrid and Liverpool was better, was sharper. But in terms of overall all-round player, I think Wayne Rooney was a better player. When it comes to strength, powerful shot, set pieces, he would bang in a free kick. His athleticism and energy, if you could play Wayne Rooney in a 10, I thought he was very versatile. At one point, he was played in midfield. It mattered less where you put him on the pitch. He would play for you the game. So that's where maybe I would put Wayne Rooney above Fernando Torres. But thank you so much for that, Rio Dandy. ETG says, me, Hugo Ekitike. Wow. Okay, hot take. You also say Lamine Yamal. You say, nah, Liverpool fan, but Wayne Rooney was too much for Torres. Okay, see, at least I do not share my opinions or school of thoughts alone. There's some relatability to all this, you know. There's some relatability to all this. I feel that overall, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, Wayne Rooney had a better career. My brother Hurricane is better than Rooney in the Premier League. Another hot take. Again, like I say, when it comes to finishing, in front of that goal, the players that you're going to cite are better than Wayne Rooney. I do not know how they compare in terms of overall Premier League goals, but I want to think Hurricane is up there. But what I've said, when you look at their all-round game, I think Rooney was better than very many players. First of all, he was such a hardworking guy, almost a workaholic. He had that powerful shot. He was relentless, or industrious. Really, really brilliant a player. Neymar versus Rooney debate. No. That was crazy. I did not want to have it. And I remember looking onto it and I was thinking to myself, really? Neymar's talent was here. Rooney was here. Talent was. Neymar, here. There's levels to this thing. You see, a lot of times, and that's where we lose conversations when we are persuaded by spreadsheet statistics, and that kind of thing. So, but Neymar, Jesus Christ, the things that he would do with the ball, his ability. Go back to Neymar in that Barcelona team of MSN. That is Messi, Suarez, and Neymar. Excellent. Of course, I feel that he's one of those players that has been caused by injuries from reaching his full potential. Of course, part of it was his doing when every time his sister's birthday would come up, he would opt to be injured and be away celebrating the sister's birthday. But if you gave Neymar the luck with injuries, that the kind of luck that Cristiano Ronaldo has had, and that of Lionel Messi, I think his numbers would be wildly bonkers. But also, I never felt he had the work ethic that similar to Cristiano Ronaldo, and maybe that's the difference, when it comes to work ethic. Okay, you say more chances created. I test Neymar is better still. I like Yamal, very good, but Santos Neymar is the better youngest player ever. Lamine Yamal, he needs to stay grounded. He needs to stay injury free. He needs to stay a bit humble. Brazilian top scorer as winger slash attacking midfielder, or half striker. He used to play in that 10 role. So yeah, he has all those numbers to his name or to his side. Now, guys, I forgot to put up this poll question, but let me put it up. Let me put up this poll question. Who should be Chelsea's next head coach? Oh, come on. Okay. Option 1, we have Alonso. Option 2 is Andoni Iraola. Option 3 is Oliver Glasner. Marco Silva. Let's say name any other. Let me give you that option for you guys to determine, self-determine. So that's the question. Who do you think should be Chelsea's next head coach? You have, among the options, you have Xabi Alonso, you have Andoni Iraola, and the chance you have Oliver Glasner, and then the opportunity for you to name any other who you think should be Chelsea's next coach. Remember, they are in the search for the next head coach. You say Ronaldo versus Messi. Like I said, I've said this multiple times, and I don't think I'll ever change my opinion. First of all, I feel we've been lucky to coexist in their time, in their prime, and we've watched these guys for 15 plus years at the very peak of the game, and we've been blessed to have that. To simply put it, Ronaldo versus Messi, and you choose one, I feel is to sort of simplify the debate that has been really, really good for football. I mean, when was the last time you had two players playing in the same era, dominate football to the extent that those guys have done? And in terms of winning, in terms of guiding their teams to greater heights, obviously, when you talk about accolades, you go back to the fact that, for example, Cristiano Ronaldo won only 2 Spanish La Liga titles. You go back to those facts. I think one was with Jose Mourinho, and the other with Zinedine Zidane. Was it that time? Maybe. I stand to be corrected. But yeah, so I feel 2 tremendous players. I simply appreciate them for their respective strength and greatness. If Brazil wins the World Cup, Neymar should win the Ballon d'Or. Hot take. Let me tell you guys, I've looked around, and it's a question that keeps pressing within my mind. Who deserves to win the Ballon d'Or this season? But to put it fair and square, maybe the season is yet to climax and we are yet to ascertain all the facts. But you look around and you feel that there's not been a lot of exceptional players this season. And this is not to say that I would have expected certain figures when it comes to goals and assists. Not really. But first of all, the World Cup in itself is going to be determined. The Ballon d'Or is going to be determined not solely, but a good part of it with who wins the World Cup. So if Neymar were to come up with prime Neymar 2015 and it guides Brazil to the triumph of the World Cup, he will be in the conversation. I've said this before. You look at Kylian Mbappe and what Real Madrid have achieved this season, which is nothing. Transpose him into the French national team, and if he bangs in the goals and France wins the World Cup, they're going to put that name in the conversation for the Ballon d'Or and possibly give it to him. And then suddenly, all these goal contributions, of course, UEFA Champions League top scorer with 15 goals, last I checked, was La Liga top scorer with 24 goals. They would want to attach more value to those numbers than they actually commanded. Because for me, yes, you scored those goals, but what did they help your team achieve? The simple answer would have been nothing. Absolutely nothing. Therefore, I cannot consider you. You know, Thomas Bola says France will win the World Cup. The Kiricha Kavashkeria will win the Ballon d'Or. No, I don't think Kavashkeria will win the Ballon d'Or. And the reason for that, like I said, is because it's a World Cup year. Because it's simply a World Cup year. Look, he's not even been voted League One Player of the Season. What then makes you think that then the world will bend to a certain narrative and accept him for a Ballon d'Or winner? It's just not going to happen, or it's not that simple. Okay, Varan says, Varan Chuck says, how are you? I'm all right, bro. How are you doing? Oh, sorry, not bro. Varan, are you a he or a she? I don't want to misrepresent people's gender identity. I don't want to misrepresent people's gender identity. So, guys, keep those votes coming. Only three people have voted. Vote. Who do you think should be Chelsea's next head coach? Do you contend Oliver Glasner is a guy? Do you contend Xabi Alonso deserves it? Do you contend Andoni Iraola deserves it? So please respond to that poll question. Now, as you respond to the poll question, allow me inform you that Chelsea are really, really pursuing Xabi Alonso. He's high on their list. Of course, it's a list that in which they've previously considered names like Luis Felipe, formerly at Flamengo, Francesco Farioli, Oliver Glasner, Andoni Iraola is in consideration. Those kinds of names, those kinds of names. And this is according to Fabrizio Romano, who says this is just in almost. Says Xabi Alonso opens doors to Premier League move in this summer after initial contacts with his agent. Chelsea have a shortlist with candidates for the job and are aware of his availability. Same for Andoni Iraola, who wants to continue in the Premier League. Remember, Andoni Iraola made the decision that he will be parting ways with AFC Bournemouth at the end of the season, and they've since appointed Marco Rose to come and take over the reins at AFC Bournemouth. So there's that really. And I mean, what can I say? Deserved or otherwise? I feel, regardless of who Chelsea chooses, I've said this before and I'll repeat it, they need to put their house in order. They need to put their house in order. Let's discuss Chelsea a little more in the bit. This is an exclusive, apparently, from Ronnie Santos. He's a football agent, who says from Lira, Uganda to Istanbul, Turkey, Turkish giants Fenerbahce SK scouts are in Tanzania for now 4 days, and the only reason is none other than the star boy Alan Okello. They will again watch him in the next game. The first game, they watched him. He scored 2 and assisted 1. Young SC will ask for around 3 million euros for the Cranes International. That's Alan Okello. He's a Uganda Cranes, star boy. He's played for clubs like KCCA, like Vipers. He's had stints away from home and things like that. So let's wait and see how things will go down to that respect. But back to the Chelsea conversation. For me, I've said Marco Silva at Fulham does not deserve this job. I think he will choke on it. So Chelsea better off with somebody else. But also, if whether it's Xabi Alonso, whether it's Oliver Glasner, whether it's Andoni Iraola, whether it's Filipe Luis, whether it's Cescola Fabregas, whether it's Francesco Farioli, Chelsea need to get their house in order. You need to streamline duties. You need to stop having 5 sporting directors. You need to stop having this idea of too many people doing the same job. That does not help the team. It does not help the team. We need to have the ownership, board level, chairman, whatever the titles are, have a CEO, have a technical director or director of football, have a head of recruitment, and things like that, and then get yourself in order. Jive at 5. They need Rudy Gullit. Wow. Really? So, because within the Chelsea current environment, even an elite manager would fail. You cannot have a situation for me where you have the medical department dictating terms for the manager, then, bosses are saying you ought to play this player and you have to play that player, you ought to give that player minutes. You ought to trust that you've appointed the right man, let them do their job, let them cook, as we often say these days, So the idea of, you see, when you have that many sporting directors, everybody is going to be rooting for a different player, whether genuinely or for selfish interest or because that player's agent has strongly whispered in their ears, So they need to sort that out. Let the manager have or head coach have a small group of people to work with, people that he can sit with on a round table and discuss things and justify himself and give a vision for the club for what he feels they should look like in terms of how they apply themselves on the pitch. It is okay for a team owner to ask, we bought this player expensively, why are they not playing? I understand that. But for you to then have an overly reaching arm, it's not good, Because at the end of the day, if they are your bosses, they're going to intimidate you into doing things that ordinarily you wouldn't want to be doing. Today, if Pep Guardiola decided that Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante is done at Manchester City, they're not going to argue against it. They're not going to oppose him. Why? They trust him. He has the full authority. If Mikel Arteta wakes up tomorrow and he freezes out Kai Havertz, yes, he may have asked for him to be bought, but he'll do what he feels is necessary for the team, and not so many questions internally would be asked of him because he's trusted. He's trusted. And that's what you want. That's what you want for your manager. That's what you want for your head coach. To have that trust that he can get things done, And it is what it is. So Chelsea, as you ponder about who to appoint, you ought to think about things in that respect. If you're not going to allow the head coach, the manager, have his say on things, then you may as well not bother people, But I learned yesterday that Filipe Luis was being considered for the Chelsea job and eventually to take on at Strasbourg before the appointment of Gary O'Neill. But looks like things did not work out. But we'll have to wait and see. So anyways, guys, it's been a wonderful morning. Jive, thank you so much. Varan, thank you so much. Thomas Bola, a pleasure. Lashgush, always nice to see you around. ETG, Thank you so much for your wonderful contribution. Thank you so much for having been part of this morning's broadcast. Michael, uh, Michael Barros, thank you so much. Rio Dandy, always a pleasure. Raymond Kangumba, thank you so much for having been part of this morning's broadcast. Allow me call it short or cut it here and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Let's continue the conversation tonight at 11 p.m. East African time for more discussions about football. We'll get to look forward to the Manchester City game and among other things around the world of sports. Thank you. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day, and until we do this again next time. You've been such a wonderful audience. Thank you for all our new subscribers, new community. Keep watching. Do not just stop at subscribing. After subscribing, go and watch the content under the video section, under the short section, name it all. Go and watch. Those who watch our live broadcasts long after they've ended, we do not take your love and support for granted. It's been a pleasure. Have yourselves a blessed day. Bye-bye for now.